I'm Sam Legassic.
And I'm Dreadful Dan Gallagher. And we're two old buddies that have lived our life at the edge of the mainstream.
So come join us where things are a little odd. This is the
You've got to believe.
It's alive! It's loose!
This earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to ODDCAST Music, Movies, Music, and Gaming. And as always, I'm here with Dreadful Dan. Hi, Dan.
Hello, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. And how are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm quite hungry actually. I've been working up an appetite, looking forward to this this lovely Texan chickpea moussaka that you've promised we're going to have.
Well, the problem with it is that there's a fair bit of meat in this one.
Well, that's no good.
I know you might have a problem with that.
I thought it was chickpea. God damn you.
No, I've got a whole barbecue of unidentified meats hanging in a big red oven.
Well, that doesn't sound absolutely delicious like I was imagining. No,
it's not delicious at all. It's quite disgusting, actually. But it's quite apt. Because today, Dan, we're going to be discussing the 1974 Tobe. How do you even say it? Toby? He's like Tom York. He just adds an extra. Yeah, exactly. Idiot. Tobe Hooper film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America. Stop! This is the movie that is just as real, just as close, just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
So, Dan, before we get into Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just fill me in. Is there anything you've been watching, listening to, playing this week?
Quite a lot, actually. I saw a film on YouTube called Out of the Loop, which I'd never heard of, to be honest. And I thought, how am I not aware
you kept out of the loop?
Huh?
Well, you kept out of the loop. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, the whole music industry has been conspiring against me. And you'd enjoy it as well. It's a film from 1997 about the Chicago music industry.
Right.
And there's all this stuff about all the major labels went from Seattle. Once they'd exhausted Seattle and bought up all those bands, they went to Chicago. Mm-hmm. So they're interviewing Touch and Go, record label, Jesus Lizard, Veruca Salt.
Yeah, remember them.
A few other bands that I'd never heard of, some of which were terrible and some of which actually seemed pretty good. And there's all this stuff about like, is it right to sell out? And if you sign with a major label, what can you expect? Steve Albini was being interviewed in it.
Right.
So that was really cool. Didn't know anything about it. And all the comments of people going, oh my God, I've been looking to see this for 20 years. And someone's uploaded that. So that was really cool.
Yeah. Nice. What else have you been doing?
I've been listening to this guy called Reptoid,
Right.
who it's one guy, and he's a drummer. And I don't know how he does it live, but I think he has like a little condenser mic in a mask.
Right.
So he drums and sings, and he has all these samples and synths and things going. But I was listening to his album called Worship False God, which just came out. And I thought that was really cool. It's kind of like, it's like Lightning Bolt. It's like industrial noise rock, but with some kind of like quite heavy, stodgy, like Motorhead-ish kind of riffs and some kind of like thrash sounds as well. But
it's weird.
It's pretty weird. His whole presentation's quite weird, but I thought it was quite cool because it's just this like, and that's what I wanted to do at some point. I remember thinking like being in a band not on my own, but as the drummer, and having some kind of like little mic strapped to my face with a mask.
You're not thinking like a boy band where it's just a little mic in front.
He's just taken that and like made it a bit more interesting, right? And then in between, basically when I've been working, I've been watching old X-Files episodes.
Oh, lovely.
They're really like comfort.
But hold on, what season? What season are we talking?
Season uno, right from the start.
Good.
Yeah.
Some hokey ones, but yeah, still a fairly decent season.
It's really good stuff. I think it ratchets up, doesn't it, in 2, and I think maybe 3 might be my favourite. But
3's great. 3's where it kind of finds its stride.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I always used to love about X-Files specifically, I mean, the last time I rewatched the entire series was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Like I went through the whole lot.
Yeah.
And like those, what I always loved is the FBI scenes where they're in the actual office, and usually it's like Scully talking to like some head honchos or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like it's so 90s because the Thriller, like that whole aesthetic, because it looks like someone's like, let's just sitting there in the dark. Let's turn the lights off. Like you'd never have that now. Like it just doesn't, everything's got to be a bit more like, real or whatever.
High def.
And it's like, if someone, I'm just expecting like a cleaner to come in and like switch all the lights on. Oh, sorry, didn't realise you're having a meeting. Sorry, let me turn all the lights off. It's so dark. And I know that, but that's kind of like part of the aesthetic and all this stuff, and obviously the style they're going for. But that was one of the things that I always remember stuck out when I was rewatching it. It's just like, absolutely, like all the monster stuff, it's like I'm okay with, but just the office scenes that are all just
where's the cigarette smoking man going to lurk?
Exactly. Well, yeah.
Can't just hide in a desk.
Yeah, but I'm talking about just the normal ones.
Right.
Yeah, but it's I love X-Files. Obviously, series close to both our hearts, if I remember rightly.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the I won't get into this now, but one of the seasons that people don't look back on fondly, but it's actually one of my favourite seasons. I think is season 9. I want to say, which is the one where Robert Patrick. No,
the
maybe
last
it's
one
not that
before
one.
the reboot.
Yeah, the reboot's awful, but the Robert Patrick's the Terminator 2 guy.
Yeah.
David Duchovny left or whatever.
Yeah.
And he stepped in, and he was kind of like another Scully. So like Scully was a bit more of the believer because obviously she's seen loads by that point, and he was a bit like,
he's a bit more hard boiled, isn't he?
Yeah, he was like, I don't believe any of this shit. There's got to be a rational explanation. All those episodes of that whole arc with him in, top notch, really great.
Yeah, I thought they were good as well. I didn't see them at the time, but I've watched them since. I thought he was quite a good character. Just dropping this guy, and he's basically like, no, I don't necessarily believe in all this, but I'm going to kick some butt.
Yeah, and it kind of also went back to the Monster of the Week kind of style, which is when I thought it was at its strongest. Really, there were some good story based ones, but generally speaking, like the standalone ones is what made it great. Yeah, that's
anyway,
good.
What have you been engaging with?
Well, I suppose I'll go through gaming. I completed. I was going to say completed Last of Us 2. We did a whole episode on it. So if you've been listening, you're going to already know that. I played a bit of, and you might remember this. Do you remember the game Battletoads for the NES?
I don't think I played it. I remember seeing adverts for it in magazines and comics.
So I had it, and it is notoriously difficult, which you don't realise at the time until someone goes back and says how difficult it was. It's like, yeah, it was really difficult. Anyway, they did a reboot, let's say. It's not a remake. It's not like it's the same. It's a completely new game. But I got about, 2 hours in. I was like, this is shit. Just turned it off. I really hated it. But it's trying to be all like meta and a bit like tongue in cheek. And it was on Xbox Game Pass, and I was just like, this is shit. But instead, I played a little bit of the people who did Life is Strange. It's this company called Don't Nod. They've released a game called, I think it's called Tell Me Why, which is relatively new. And it's basically about twins, twin girls to begin with. I don't know, I've got to be careful how I say this, but basically one of them transitions to a man. There's an incident where this guy now killed his mum or something. That's how it starts. There's no spoilers. And he's just been let out, and he's met up with his twin sister, or once identical, if that makes sense. And now they're kind of like rummaging back to their home, their old home where they grew up. But they have this like psychic connection between them. And that's kind of like the gamey element of it. And it's all right. It's kind of the same as the Life is Strange stuff. It's very slow. It's very much a character kind of study thing, but it's okay. So I played some of that. But stuff I've been watching, I saw Tenet today, which is the new Christopher Nolan film. Went to cinema to see that proper theatre experience.
Scary.
Yeah. There's hardly anyone there, but it was good, and I really enjoyed it. It was. I won't go into it too much, but
what did he do? This Nolan,
Christopher Nolan. He's like one of the best filmmakers out there. So he did the whole Batman trilogy, the good ones: Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, etc. Interstellar, Inception, Memento.
I've seen that.
Dunkirk. All that, loads of stuff. The Prestige, another one, really good one.
Oh yeah,
Insomniac, I think he did as well, which was the Al Pacino, Robin Williams one. Is that Christopher Nolan? I think it was. I believe so. But yeah, really, really great films. And yes, this is a new one, and basically it's about future going backwards and forwards in time. So there's people who fight each other, but they're doing it in reverse. And then you kind of see things happen in one way, and then it kind of switches and you see it from another way. And it is fucking cool. But it's also a complete head fuck, because I'm still trying to make sense of the actual story. Character-wise, it actually was a bit lame. I don't think it had much depth. And the first hour was just like, it felt like each scene was introducing a new character. And it just felt like it was not moving. It was just like him going to like another room to talk to someone, and it doesn't make sense. And then he goes to another room to talk to another person, and it doesn't make sense. And then there's a bit of action, and then the same thing happens, and I'm just like, I have no idea what's happening. Like, what are they talking about? What is the story? But by the end, I was like, man, that was cool. So it really stayed with me. I think it's worth seeing again. Definitely.
I like that when a film sort of maybe doesn't quite land during the movie, and then it kind of like gets under your skin, and you find yourself thinking about it for a few days later.
Definitely,
which is kind of what happened to me with this film, actually, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
Because I remember the first time I saw it, I think I was a bit, which was with you in your bedroom.
Oh, really? Hello. Yeah.
Saucy.
Having our own chainsaw.
We want to come to mine, Netflix and chill. I've lined up a Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS. I remember kind of being like, a bit like nonplussed. But kept thinking about it then for days afterwards, and like the sense of unease that it created.
Yeah. Well, let's go into it. Why not? But yeah, this is so if people don't know, as we said before at the beginning of the show, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974 horror film, often listed as one of the best horror films of all time. And yeah, what makes it odd? Well, if you don't know anything about it, it's basically it's a classic horror trope of a group of teenagers going off the beaten track. They run into a family of essentially murderous cannibals and proceed to get murdered one by one. And there's a lot of just general weird shit in there that makes it very odd. So it's perfect for the ODDCAST. So yeah, I guess I made a lot of notes whilst I was watching it, because I think I mentioned last week when the film came up, I actually did a paper on this film. I couldn't find it, annoyingly, because, I mean, bear in mind, computers had only just been invented.
The pinnacle of your academic achievements.
Yeah.
Snuffed out.
Yeah. But I vaguely do remember about it basically being the death of the American dream and about the inverted American family, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And how the disintegration of the American family is reflective of at the time where the American dream was going downhill or stuff, or people felt it was. And yeah, so it was quite interesting watching it again, but as well, like I picked up like a lot of stuff as I was watching it, which I'll kind of just like, I'll go through. I won't go through my notes too much. And yeah, just, I'll kind of try and go through it chronologically according to my notes, but yeah, just chip in when you feel like it. I guess like the first thing is that it was kind of phrased. It was put in the context of being a true story. So right at the beginning, there's a thing saying like, this is the true story of blah, 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 and all this. And when people talk about like Blair Witch, it's a true story and stuff, you think, well, films like Texas Chainsaw did it first. Apparently this was kind of in a response to the fact that Watergate and all this stuff happened, and Toby Hooper felt like the public were being lied to all the time and all this, and this was kind of a bit of that, like lying to the general public, but it does kind of frame it as if it's supposed to be based on a true story. There's an element where it's based there's an element where it's based on a true story because there was a murderer called Ed Gein, and there's some other little tidbits which I'll go into a bit later in terms of how this film was put together and what inspired it. But what I really liked was like right from the off, like it's complete. If you remember like the first bit, you can just hear it's just pitch black, and you just hear these noises, and it's like or whatever, of like a flash going off. But with each flash, it's like some fingernails. It's like a corpse and all this stuff. It's just really like, and this is one of the things about this whole film is the sound design is fucking great.
Yeah.
And it's really creepy. It's really horrible.
Yeah.
And I actually copied this sequence when I did, I've banged on about this a couple of times now, but when I did my short film, Bloom, there's a sequence, it's only about 20 seconds, which is exactly that. It's pitch black, it's a flash, you see little bits. But this is where I got it from, was from this intro segment. But they obviously did it like a million times. I didn't have like any kind of corpse stuff at hand. But immediately you're kind of like straight in with like, it's like a dream, like you're asleep a little bit.
Yeah.
And the whole, this whole film kind of works into the idea of like, it's just one big nightmare, which I'll kind of go into a little bit more later. But I really felt like this, it's almost like, and bear with me here, you're being read a story, like story time for bed. And then you're kind of like asleep and you're starting to get these weird like flashes in. So it's kind of as if you're transitioning into this like dream state almost just from that. And also it's getting you asking questions of like, what is this? Where am I? And what's weird, and I thought what was really cool is that the images are shocking, like the corpses and the stuff and the fact that whatever, but the element, you're just like, who's taking the picture? Like,
yeah.
forget everything else is going on. The fact of what makes it really scary is that there's someone there taking pictures of it in the dark.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about
and
that.
I really like that bit. What did you think about that whole intro segment?
It seemed quite stylistic compared to the rest of the film.
Yeah.
I wonder if they got someone else in at the end to do some nice title sequences and things.
Yeah, I really like the actual title sequence itself, which is like that red, like pure red blood with all the weird images behind it. It's all really cool. And I think the color generally in this film is great. And like that intro right after that bit when it's like that, it's like a scarecrow in a field, right? But it's like it's a body,
two bodies on top of a
That's right. It's been set up in this weird thing, but like from that shot, it's horrific and it's disgusting. But also, it is like yellow, like hot. It is like fucking hot. So there's all this stuff going on in America right now, right? I think it's like on the West Coast where the sky's orange, and it feels very much like that, like post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland almost. But it's the fact the whole film they're going on about how hot they are.
Yeah.
Like they're in hell almost, like everything's just burning up around them. And that sweat and dirt and grit is just like in the film everywhere, which is fucking great. And also the fact that it's like all dusty and just horrible. And they're put in this like weird position. And there's something almost like, which comes throughout this kind of like tribal, sacrificial, cultish, like satanic thing up throughout the whole film. And this is part of it, like as if they've built this shrine or something from the dead bodies and put them in this like position. And you're hearing all this like news stuff about like cholera and all this, like people dying. So it's like, this is like America's going to hell in like one image.
Yeah.
Like it's fucking bad. It's really fucking hot. All this bad shit's happening. And then you've got the music in the background, which is like that ding, shh, and it's like this almost like, I want to say like Buddha kind of music. Like, I don't know, like as if someone's just got like it's like an Eastern, I don't know, like sensibility or something. And so that again kind of puts it in this like mystical, supernatural, weird
droning
state, because it's not actual music. It's more just like instruments and noises and all this, which is really cool. And a lot of like groaning and screaming and all this stuff kind of layered on top. So it feels like as if it's like a church choir gone wrong. And all that. So that's like in the first few seconds. And like immediately I just remember sitting there when I was rewatching this, and I haven't seen it in a while, just being like, this has set the tone.
Yeah.
Like perfectly for what's about to happen. I feel unsettled. It's fucking weird. Stuff's happening. And it's also relevant to the story because you find out it's the hitchhiker guy later has been doing it and taking the photos. So it's not as if it's for now either, like for shock value. It's actually, there's a plot point to it as well. And they've got like a shot of the moon. Again, the moon, mystical, like a supernatural thing to it. Just that whole intro sequence was just great. You could feel the heat coming off the fucking screen.
And then you get an armadillo.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, the dead armadillo just lying on the road, fucking roadkill. And
even that's I thought that was quite an arresting image.
Yeah.
Again, I think all this early part, it's all just really sensory, isn't it? Just being fed these images around. It's all it's death, isn't it? But it's just it's not too in your face and intense.
That's right.
It's just building up that sense of foreboding and unease, I think.
Yeah, it's making you feel disgusted, like on purpose. Yeah, and she said, like, just full of that unease. This is where you meet basically our Scooby-Doo gang, a group of weirdos. And I guess it's like so there's the whole thing. A lot of films were doing this at the time, but there's a general, like, you know, Hills Have Eyes or even like Deliverance or whatever, where there's like a fear of small town America. But at the same time, there's a reversal where it's the fear of like big city folk basically coming in to take over, and all this, like a clashing of cultures almost, even though you're in the same country or whatever.
Yeah.
There's that kind of element to it. And one of the things I'm going to say, I'll say it now, but just to kind of, as I was watching it, I was kind of trying to keep in mind throughout the film, is that I would maybe argue as an idea, and tell me what you think about this, that the wheelchair guy, Franklin, the Leatherface, and essentially what happens in the film, whatever, is almost like Leatherface is like the monster that's the wheelchair guy's like creation, almost. Like he's a reflection of his like impotency, his inadequacy, his like emasculation. And that's why, you know, I'm talking this on a purely like, you know, idea, theoretical level.
Yeah.
Where like the chainsaw, like all these fucking instruments are, phallic symbol, let's say. And the fact that Leatherface looks similar to Franklin, he's disabled in another way, mentally rather than physically, but also he's like a big, powerful guy who ends up like killing all of those guys. And you can kind of see Franklin emulate some of the stuff that they do later on. And it's almost as if like he's created this monster from his, basically, the fact that he's being left out and he's not like a normal teenager or anything like that. And like the fact that he's pathetic throughout the whole thing and all this. And I would argue he's actually, for the first hour, he's the main character.
Yeah. There's something in that, definitely. I mean, there's definitely parallels drawn between Franklin and members of the family. Obviously, the hitchhiker character, quite explicitly. Yeah, he and Leatherface are obviously quite vulnerable characters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, I can see that, definitely links. And you're right, he is the main character for the first hour or however so long. How do you feel about him as a character? I feel really sympathetic towards him. But when I was watching some stuff, they were kind of saying, the actors and the directors were like, oh, he's so annoying, and he kind of like he kind of asks for it and gets what he deserves. I was like, that's so harsh.
Yeah, apparently he was a bit method about it as well, the actual actor guy, and he was really annoying them all. I think that, there's that element where you're kind of stuck with him and he is pathetic, and there is an element where you kind of want to see, he is kind of asking for it a little bit, but he's asking for it in a sense of not only being so pathetic, but also there's like that mysticism around it from a narrative thing where he's kind of like asking for it almost as well. So he's the instigator between, bearing in mind, he's the one that wants to go to the house. Yeah. He's the one that sends them off to like go get killed, basically. And all this. So it's, I think that he is an annoying character, but also I think he works to be, he's supposed to be kind of pathetic. But also I think he's a good kind of like red herring, because I think if you came into this, it's one of those weird things, right, where we watched it when we were kids, we kind of knew what was happening. But I think maybe if you came into this fresh, you would think that, there's spoilers, by the way. I should say that. They all die, sorry. Well, almost all of them. But there's a minute where you might think, oh, he's the disabled one. Maybe he's going to, be the last survivor. Yeah. That's not the case.
I was I'm jumping ahead, but I was absolutely, even though I knew he died, I was still absolutely shocked when that happens. Just don't expect. And like I said, I felt very sympathetic towards him. So when it's horrible when he died. I didn't want that to happen to him at all. I also think he's the most charismatic, and you see him being excluded by the group, and I just felt a bit sorry for him. And he gets more screen time, and you sort of warm to him a bit. And yeah, but maybe that's it. And then he's sort of like symbolically killed off.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing where like almost all of them, if they're taking the piss out of him or whatever, they seem to kind of not die in that order, but like I can't remember any of their names basically. But I think there's when it's left to like him and his sister. I think that's why she's like the survivor, in that if we're going with the theory of like Leatherface is his own creator, like Frankenstein's monster almost. And there's almost this like, and I might be reading it too much into this, but I don't know, like maybe he's like lustful towards his sister. He just really cares about her, and that's how she kind of survives or something. I don't know. I was
she wasn't nasty to him.
Yeah, but she was towards the end, and you know she was kind of, well, she wanted to get the torch being a phallic symbol, and there was like a bit of power.
Symbols.
It's all there, mate. And but either way, if you think of it as a phallic symbol or not, there's a power struggle there between who gets the torch and whatever. And she, at one point, she's just like, I can't push you, but he makes such a fucking fuss that she ends up having to push him anyway, and things like that. He's just such a fucking wet tissue. Yeah, and I thought it was all very interesting, but yeah, we kind of jumped a little bit ahead there, but
should we do a bit of exposition?
Yeah, go on.
Roll back a bit and well, should we go back to when we see them first in the van? In the car, yeah. Go on, I've talked a lot. When you take over for a little bit. Yeah, I mean, first impressions, seeing them, thinking about when this is set and everything, it's kind of like it's the death of the Summer of Love still,
right?
Isn't it? It's post Vietnam, post Manson family murders, so that's kind of there in the background as well. This idea,
yeah,
and
the hippies.
They look pretty hippy dippy, and actually Franklin stands out from that, doesn't he? Because when they pick up, so they find a hitchhiker and they pick him up. Although before that, actually, they have some interactions, don't they, with like a group of old men.
Yeah, with the graveyard, because they're like, these graves got dug up, and like our grandfather was here or something. But there's all these like, they're all like drunk and they're weird looking and they're all like a bit horrible or sleazy or something about that. So there's already that inherent like fear, and they're also old. Yeah. I think the emphasis there is old. So there's like, not only is there a thing of they're from out of town, there's also a generational thing here as well. It's like the young people, the future, the American future, whatever.
That really unnerved me. I could really feel like my tension ratcheting up just from that, like the stress of that social situation.
Yeah,
and how horrible they were.
Yeah, they were really horrible. And yeah, they're also like, I remember one of them in the van is talking about like the Zodiac and all this stuff and Neptune or whatever. So again, playing into that like mystic,
classic hippie dippy stuff.
Yeah, thing as well. Yeah, New Age stuff as well. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, sorry, but yeah, that whole bit was like, because I forgot basically watching it this time around that I can't remember what I thought this bit was. But I'm like, oh, they are actually like making sure their grandfather's grave is all right. There is a reason why they're there. They're not just mucking around.
Yeah, and again, like you said with that opening, it kind of does tie into the plot point of there have been these grave robberies.
Yeah.
So then they pass this guy, this hitchhiker, and they pick him up, and he looks pretty weird. He's got that like port stain birthmark, and yeah, Franklin in this scene, he seems to mesh more with the weirdo hitchhiker as a character than with his hippie brethren.
Yeah, well, it's true. This plays into like my theory a little bit more, because when they talk about killing the cows, and there's that one great shot, by the way, of that cow looking dazed, and there's just that spit or whatever just hanging off it.
Yeah,
and that always stays with me, which is really weird because it lasts for literally like 1 second.
Yeah.
And it looks fucking horrible. And I don't know if it was real or whatever, but it's fucking nasty.
It feels like stock footage, doesn't it? I think that's why, because it's something totally like stylistically different. I think it is real.
And there's these little like, just to kind of go down that whole little bit, there's loads of these little like cutaways and like sounds and stuff throughout that just like it's like picking up the details of disgust, which is really good. There's like a bit where there's like loads of spiders or something later on, and there's a weird sound, and he does loads of these things just to kind of pick up, like, so you're intrinsically looking at like how disgusting this stuff is, getting really close to it. But you're right, yeah. Franklin gets weirdly like excited by the brutality of it, and he's getting like really animated about like killing the cows and all this stuff. And then who turns up but this guy who kills the cows. Step one of his like bringing his fantasies to life almost. But
good, good theory. I like it.
Yeah.
And he professes there's a love for the head cheese.
Yeah, fucking head cheese. What is head cheese? I don't even know what it is.
Like the head cheese.
My brother makes the best head cheese or something. What is head cheese?
I just presume it's, I don't know if anyone's listening from the south that could let us know. We don't have head cheese in the UK.
No, I don't know what it is. I thought, is it like just like pate or something? I don't know.
How do they eat it? Well, he tells you what it is, doesn't he? But I don't know how it's like and sold.
Yeah,
how people eat it. Just eat it with a bowl, out of a bowl with a spoon or something. Anyway, it's vile. But again, he looks so weird, and because you're kind of trained in horror tropes, you think it's too obvious that he's going to like attack them or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that whole time you're like, he's not going to, but it's just increasingly weird.
Yeah.
And you're kind of in the shoes of the, the youngsters.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, it just makes you feel really uneasy because he doesn't do any until he attacks them with the blade. He doesn't do anything, doesn't step over the mark. But you're like, we need to get this guy out of here. He's really weird, and it just creates again it's like awkward social sort of tension.
Yeah, but there's definitely like a like a socio-economic thing as well going on, because there's at one point he's like, my family's always been in me or whatever, and then they talk about the gun, and he's like, oh, you don't want to use the gun. It's like, why not? It's like, no, the gun puts people out of jobs. So again, talking about the state of America and the fact that, modernization and technological advancement and stuff, and all these like working class folk are being put out of jobs and stuff. So there's a bit of a socioeconomic commentary there with that bit. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of like you think, it's not too bad, but then when he takes the picture and then it asks for $2, like $2, like whatever. Like, I know back then $2 was, a bit more than what it'd be now, but yeah, something like that. And they're like, no, I'm not going to give you that. And that's when it kind of gets, it kind of freaks out. But yeah, I can't remember if he cuts himself before or after that.
I think he's already cut himself.
Right. So that's the bit where it's like, okay, this guy's a psycho. But he's also like trying to like, he's like looking around, like, you kind of want him to like settle down or something. Like,
it's just all comfortable. Nervous tension. Yeah.
Yeah. And he just looks a bit like retarded or whatever in some ways. Like,
it's horrible. And then what's the next thing? So yeah, when they decline buying the photo, then he gets all this paraphernalia out.
Yeah.
It looks like drug paraphernalia, but he just like burns that photo in what looks like a kind of mystical rite.
Yeah.
And again, and is that when he does all this kind of like, he does some like sticking out his tongue and all this business?
Yeah, so I thought that was a bit, that kind of comes into play a bit later as well. But yeah, when he cuts himself and then he cuts Franklin, it's almost like there's some like blood sacrifice here. Takes the photo, and obviously photos associated with, Japan or whatever. It was like, trapping the soul and all this stuff. So it's almost as if you're right. He's done some like spiritual rite or something like that. He's like marked his prey or something like that. And, like a sacrificial kind of thing. And then, he kind of, when he gets thrown out, he's like blowing his tongue, which at the time you're just like, it stands out because it's quite a childish thing to do. Obviously,
it looks silly, actually,
a bit
doesn't it?
Nutty, yeah.
After all that menace and tension, he's just running along going, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly. And but that kind of comes into play a bit later on. But yeah, so kind of jumping ahead. But what I love about this as well is that I don't know if it's around this time where they talk about how it's like, oh, our granddad lived here or something.
Yeah.
And he goes like the old Franklin place. And I'm like, but his name's Franklin. So is his name Franklin?
I hope so.
Because the old Franklin place. I'm like, but you're Franklin, are you? Like, what? But yeah, so that whole bit is like quite unnerving, but you're like, thank God he's gone.
Yeah. It's a massive relief.
Yeah. And I quite like, when horror films do that, where it's like, it's quite early on, but they've like introduced a threat or something quite soon into the film. And then from there on, it kind of like is a bit more of a slow build. But I like that initial, like, you already feel uneasy. Totally. And now there's been a direct threat, and now you're like, fuck. Like, there's almost like been a bit of relief, as in like, oh, right, I'm over that hill a little bit. There was this big unease, something's happened, he's kicked out, so we've kind of made it, so I can kind of settle a little bit.
And that's what they give you then, isn't it? They give you these characters are sort of relaxing. They get to the house.
Yeah.
And you as the audience, you're kind of chilling out a bit.
Yeah.
But he is kind of there in the back of your mind, and it's a great bit of misdirection, I think. Because when you get the reveal of Leatherface, you're just not expecting it at all. You're still kind of thinking about the hitchhiker. You think hitchhiker's the villain here. He's the guy that's been robbing the graves and all this. And I think it just really, makes that moment so shocking.
Yeah.
When he's finally revealed.
Yeah. It's good. And that whole, before Leatherface even comes into the picture, there's a lot of time, more time than I thought, where they're just like faffing about.
Yeah.
And I guess because they stop off for gas, and there's like, who we find out is basically like the kind of older brother of the three, who's a bit more, I want to say a bit more mature. He's just as crazy. But here you're like, here's a like older gentleman, looks a bit smarter, whatever, fine. He's talking intelligently, doesn't seem like drunk or anything.
Yeah.
And he's like, and what I love, and again, it's this whole thing where it's like city folk and young folk like poking their noses in business that's not to do with them. He's like, don't go to that house. Like, don't go there. Don't go around other people's property. Just fuck off, basically. And then ask them if they want some of the barbecue, which, you find out later you really don't want. And then, and when they see, so there's two things. So they ask about the barbecue, right? In one of the next scenes, Franklin is eating a sausage, which makes me think that he's eaten some of the sausage from the barbecue, which means that he is now a step further in this ritual because he's now eating human flesh.
I thought you were going to say it's a phallic imagery.
Well, yeah, it's a bit of a flaccid sausage, I'm going to be honest. But what I love as well is that when they're like, oh, he's put something on the van, it's the artist that's formerly known as Prince. It's so simple. Watching it, just imagining Prince had done it. The Prince
Swans out playing Raspberry Beret.
Yeah. Oh, fucking hell, so funny. Yeah, and I was also thinking, like, they keep talking about, and then I think Sally, the sister, says something like, oh, we came here when I was a kid, like we stayed here. And it's like, so they stayed. Like that other like the Leatherface family has been there for ages. So they were literally a stone's throw from this cannibalistic family when they were kids, like some time ago. So it's like, so they're telling me that their grandparents didn't know that they were living next to these like cannibalistic killers with Leatherface, whatever. Maybe they didn't. And then there's part of me that was thinking, maybe they're all related.
Yeah.
Maybe Franklin is actually like related to these people. I don't know. But yeah, that whole thing, I was just like, God, that's weird. What does it mean that she was there when they were a kid? It's an old rickety house. But it's not as if like it's got nothing to do with the other family because they find like bones still hanging and like this little nest sacrifice or something in the middle of the house. So they or whoever has obviously been there. So yeah, I'm a bit intrigued about what the initial setup for that whole story was.
Oh yeah, you want to see the prequel that explores the Franklin legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, what were these two families like? I imagine like one was all like posh and prim, and then you've got it's like, oh, those weirdos over there with their bone lounge. But they're in like fairly close proximity. Yeah, so I don't know what the whole background was.
Bygones be bygones.
Yeah, I think it was more just like it just gives them an excuse to just go near it more than anything. But yeah, one of the bits, so with the tongue blowing and all this stuff. So when they all go off in search of the house, they're all being kids and mucking around. Franklin is having trouble getting out of the van. He's lost his knife. Phallic imagery again. He's lost his potency, which he gave to his sister, by the way, something in that, I'm sure. And and anyway, but what happens is we're hearing them doing all this and he's like shouting, but the camera is sticking with him and he starts blowing raspberries as well, which means that he's essentially, again, I'm going with my theory again here, but he's starting to like turn, basically. He's almost like evoking the spirits almost that have been, that are being part of this whole like weird nightmare, whatever's kind of going on. But the fact, I think it's very, they've done it on purpose, the fact that he's emulated what the hitchhiker has done only like a few minutes before.
Yeah, it's very noticeable. And even if you don't think about it too literally, you get a sense like, oh, he's definitely, something's going on and he's doing what that weird hitchhiker did. And it does feel like, it feels like
like he's
education. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I'm like, bear in mind, we still haven't seen Leatherface yet. I'm like, oh, this is all part of like creating this monster. But essentially, like, I love the bit like at the end of that scene after that, as he's trying to like wheel himself out, he like hits his leg and like screams ouch or something. He's just so pathetic. He just can't do anything.
I feel so bad for him at this point because they're all just like, they hit the house and they're like, see ya.
Yeah,
and they're so selfish. They brought him along, and he's just got to sit there in his wheelchair on his own while they go and like fuck by the lake or whatever.
Yeah, totally frolic. Well, they're like, let's go swimming. It's like, look at the state of the house. What do you think the pool's going to be like? Fucking weirdo. I just presumed it was just like, let's go for a shag and just whatever. But what? And this is part of it again. So this is the first lot where it's like, yeah, it's just down this path. And then he kind of sends them off. And again, like each time he's doing this, he's basically sending them off to get slaughtered. And I think there's something in the fact that that's happened immediately after. He's like blown the raspberry at them. And when we start going near the house, we see like, there's all these like cool little details, like all the cars and whatever, but there's this like old ripped tent and like there's loads of like clocks with nails through them. And I'm like, again, it's this mystical thing of like, it's almost as if time doesn't exist here. Like this is laying outside of time now. And I was also like, is this like talking about the fact it's like, you know, they said about, the guns put us out of jobs or whatever. It's almost like, is this a rebellious gesture against progress or something like that?
Yeah, that's how I kind of saw it rather than sort of symbolic. I thought like, what sort of character motivation of these people?
Yeah.
It's like a way of saying, yeah, we don't accept your way of life.
Yeah.
We do things our way here. There is no time.
Yeah. And then basically, here's where we get our first look at Leatherface.
Amazing.
So tell me about what you remember basically about this moment or anything.
It's just so shocking. That corridor is so evocative. That narrow corridor. And he's calling into the house, and it already looks claustrophobic. You just do not go, do not step in that corridor. But then you hear this squealing, which is, well, to me, it sounded like a pig. So you think, oh God, someone's killing a pig in there. You know, you've had all this stuff about slaughtering, and someone's killing a pig. And if you haven't already been exposed to all the visuals from the movie and Leatherface and everything, and you didn't know that he existed, you'd maybe assume the hitchhiker's down there or something.
Yeah. Something's happening.
And you assume he's going to walk through that door and go, and you're going to, oh no, don't go down the corner and don't go in the basement. And you don't get that. You just get this huge, scary man with a fucking leather mask on, making the horrible animal noises, and just bludgeons him to death. Bam. So it's just so shocking because you just don't expect it at all.
Yeah.
And it's a great moment.
Sorry. Yeah, it happens this is one of the cool things with it. It happens very quickly.
Yeah.
He's not just like knocked out. He's like shaking, if you remember, on the floor.
Yeah.
So he takes like another hit or whatever. That's in itself again, it's like an animal or something. Like it's quite distressing in that sense. And he gets pulled in, and then the metal door shuts, which is fucking in itself.
Yeah.
And it's that the music just goes doo or whatever. And now you're like, okay, shit, just got real, basically. Something that's like you've been kind of leading up thinking, all right, whatever. And now as soon as that happened, it all happens in a few seconds. And you're like, okay, it's like turned a corner here. We're like now in the second act, basically, of like the structure. And I think also, sorry, go on.
Sorry, no, sorry, you carry on.
No, I was just going to say that it's something worth remembering here is that even though he's the monster, and something that happens a bit later on, like essentially he's these are trespassers, basically trespassers on his property, and he's terrified. Actually, like is what this actually is about. And a bit later on, the older brother's like, "I told you not to leave your brother alone in the house," or whatever. And clearly, it's because Leatherface is. And that's his whole backstory, is that he's supposed to be like a mentally disabled person, basically, and that he really struggles with that. And there's that great bit which comes on a bit later where he kills, like someone else, one of the other ones come in, and he goes and he's like freaking out and he's looking out the window and he's really distressed. He's rubbing his head and he's like, doesn't know what to do. And that little bit there, it like adds so much to the film because it basically humanizes it, which is what a lot of like slasher films and stalker films tended not to do. It kind of gave him this weird, like you were saying earlier, like a vulnerability. Yeah. And also you realize like these people are just fucking turning up to his house. He probably doesn't see anyone ever. Yeah. And he's fucking scared like a little child. Yeah. But at that first instance, you're just like, what's that? And he's dead. And then you've got this, it's quite famous now, but this shot, which apparently was not in the storyboard and they weren't going to do it, but the cinematographer, and I think Hooper as well, pushed for it, where it goes under the bench and it follows her ass as she walks up to the house, the girlfriend. And it's cool because now the reason why it works so well is that now the house is a threat. So you've got this big dominating house looking down on you. And also there's a kind of mix between, a lot of films, there's a mix between like sex and horror and all this stuff and the sexualization sometimes of violence, whatever. But you've got like her fucking like sexy ass basically walking towards this like big house. And a lot of what good horror does is it mixes those kind of things. You'll find like Silent Hill, I always use it as an example. So they did a lot of research onto like what makes people scared. And it's taking things that seem normal and human and twisting them. Yeah. And also sex, anything like related to sex, and especially if you do it in a horrific way, makes things like tenfold more horrific. So the fact you've got this like sexy butt walking, but you're also fearful of this house is messing with you on a subconscious level. Yeah. As a man, whatever. But just the idea of like when there's like a sexual angle to it, it kind of weirdly adds to the weirdness and horror of the situation. So that whole shot is great, and a lot of people talk about that one shot. But they weren't even going to do it. It wasn't storyboarded or prepared for or anything, but they fought for it and they did it, and it's a really cool shot. And then this is where we see the bone room.
Oh, so cool.
Which is cool.
I was watching this documentary was on my DVD,
Hmm.
and they're talking to the art director.
Right.
He's a great guy. He's like, he could have been in the film himself. He's this old, like, he seems like Texan. He's an old guy, and he speaks with a kind of whistle. So he's like, oh,
Brilliant.
anyway, he's like talking about, he got really into it, like collecting the animal bones to be able to make this room, and really thinking about, what was good is he kind of said, like, I didn't try and make masterpieces. I really tried to get into the mind of the character who would make this, and using what would be available to them. And then, and that extended to the mask itself.
Mm.
And then he threw out some kind of like disses to Tom Savini, who made the mask for the third film. He was like,
Texas Chainsaw 3.
Oh, I think, no, sorry, 2. He made it for 2.
Right. Yeah.
It was like, you can just see Tom Savini in it. It looks like it's been made by a professional Hollywood art director.
Yeah.
I want my stuff to look like it has been made by a mentally retarded person, just out of everything they had to hand. And I think that's it does feel authentic.
Yeah.
It feels grimy, and it's just so unpleasant. That chicken in a cage, image of like, it's pretty resonant. It's like just trapped.
Yeah, it's
like,
cool because you're kind of like, she's looking around and seeing it all. And so again, it's picking up all the details. There's that really great fucking wide shot of like what's supposed to be like a couch of some sort.
Oh, yeah.
That really sticks with me. But yeah, at the moment, you're kind of like looking around like, and I think that's what is great about it is that you as the audience, it's basically piqued your curiosity, right? You've seen that little bit. You didn't really get that far in that the face killed him. But now you want to know what's in that house.
Yeah.
And what's great is that, and a lot of good, I think I've said this before, like horror films, whatever, do this, is they slowly show you the architecture of the house without you even knowing it. So literally, I know, having watched that film recently, I would be able to like mentally go around that house and know what was in pretty much every room. And I know how it's built up. So by doing things like that, they're showing you how it's all put together.
Yeah.
And I like the idea there's just this room full of bones because it also makes no sense. Like there's bones on the floor. It's like, it's not like a hospitable, nice place. It's like this weird like shrine. It doesn't work on a practical level either, which I think kind of messes with my head.
You should go there.
Yeah.
You should go there and have a walk around. It's a grill. It's
like I heard it's a restaurant now. Could you imagine? So fucking weird. I would go there. Yeah, I've been to Texas actually, but yeah, I'd go back to go there. But yeah, so she gets put up on a meat hook, and then we see him pick up the chainsaw and chop the guy up. And I think what was cool about that bit and about the film basically is that the weapon, it's not just like a scary weapon. He's using it as a practical instrument.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, I'm doing this for effect or anything like that. He's like, this is what I use. Like, it's not like, oh, it's a chainsaw because it like, apparently Hooper got the idea because he thought, what's the quickest way of going through crowds of people at Christmas? Chainsaw, probably. Probably true. But it's a practical use for Leatherface as a character, which I think is good and it added to the realism kind of it.
He's just a hard-working guy.
Yeah. Say realism.
Being industrious.
Yeah. And then, we cut back to the people, but they're having like, what I love, again, it's like what you were saying before, Franklin is really worried that the hippie guy is following them. And you're just thinking by this point, how stupid was I to like think that hippie guy was the threat? Like there's something so much bigger happening now. And he's just worried that the hippie guy is following them. Like, forget about it kind of thing. And they're all kind of getting annoyed at Franklin, and so are you as the audience. I think what happens is someone else comes in. Oh, the next guy comes in with a like afro.
Yeah.
And he opens that freezer and you see her dead, and then suddenly she gets up and she starts shaking, and there's that fucking horrible noise, like screeching.
Yeah.
And then immediately Leatherface comes in, kills him, shuts the freezer and all that, and he's like freaked out. And I'm just like, that whole bit, again, it's these like slow build. And then climax, and then suddenly he comes back down. because it all happens so quickly that it's almost as if like, you know, it's happened before you can even process what's happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really great. And that shot of him where he's like licking his lips and all this under the mask, you're just like, ah.
Is that where you got it from? Because you do that a lot, don't you?
What, lick my lips?
You do that?
Yeah, only after I've put girls in the freezer. It makes me thirsty. So this is when it kind of, there's a bit of a jump cut here, really, because then it's nighttime, basically, by this point. And Franklin and Sally are just like by the car, like screaming and shouting. And you as the audience are like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, shut the fuck up. What are you doing? Just get out of there.
Honking the horn.
Yeah, but they haven't got keys. They fight over the flashlight. She's like, I can't push you. And it's like, oh God, Franklin, like, let's just get rid of Franklin. And that's what I do like, is that you just want, you do get annoyed with the audience and whatever. And so when like they're going through the pitch black, and if you, it goes on like a little bit longer than you feel like it should, because she's struggling. It's so dark, you can hardly see anything. They're shouting, whatever. And you're the whole time you're just thinking, oh my God, like, just leave. You should have just left him. Like, fuck him. Like, she's a little tiny blonde girl pushing this guy in a wheelchair. She can't do it. Pitch black. And then, as if the wish was commanded, Leatherface comes out and sticks him with a fucking chainsaw.
Do you really think... Is that how it's... I think that is how it was intended to work. Because I feel sorry for him, and I felt for them in that situation, but I do appreciate that it does seem that the filmmakers are trying to position it like that, as if like he's so annoying, and then bam,
him off.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. So from here on end, there's about whatever, close to half hour or something. This is the third act at this point, really, and from here on out. And this is what really makes the film for me. It is non-stop nightmare fuel through to the final second. It does not stop at any point. And this is what I love. It's like a sprint. I think that's what has the biggest effect on me, is that it's like a half hour, whatever, frenzy of stuff. And it's done really well. Suddenly our main character's killed off, bit of a like psycho thing there, which is also based on a gun. But 2/3 of the way through, like Sally, who's not really done much at all by this point, it's suddenly our heroine.
Yeah.
And now it's like she's just running for her life, but it's really like close. Like, and I think the fact that they do stuff like she gets hit by a branch, or she gets caught in the brushes or whatever, and all this stuff, so that it slows her down, so they can have a lot of these moments where they're like really fucking close. And that whole chase scene is just amazing. And then she runs into the house, into Leatherface's actual house, which is great.
And you're like,
screaming.
no.
And you're like, fuck, you're in the house. Fuck's sake, because you see that red corridor and all this. You're like, oh my God, she's literally in the worst place. She goes upstairs and you're like, okay, so you're immediately like, I wonder what's upstairs. Goes to that room, which is like that horrible, like, it's almost like, I think it's not filmed in a fish lens, but almost. And it's just those two fucking corpses there. And she's like, help me. And they're just dead. When you find out then one of them's not. It's like rocking back for this completely bare, empty room. They're just sitting there. Like, there's just two fucking things just sitting there, just looking at each other. Like, that in itself is fucking horrific. And she suddenly realizes where she is. And I love the way she just fucking jumps out the window. But before she does that, actually, there's a bit where she goes downstairs and Leatherface comes in through the front door and she screams and he like, ugh. He like jumps back a bit, like, oh God, and then starts after her again. Like, he was almost a bit scared of her there for a second.
Yeah.
Screaming. But yeah, she jumps right out of a fucking window. And I remember thinking, God, that's brave. I remember it happening, but I was just like, she just goes for it. She just cracks out that window.
You would though, wouldn't you? Adrenaline pumping. You'd just be like, you would. There's the exit. Go on, get out.
There's a way out, I'm out. But yeah, they're like, and then again with the chase, they're closing the distance and all this stuff. I thought it was really fucking cool. And then she gets to the gas station, and you think he's like right behind her, and the door it like keeps open, and you're just like, again, it's kind of like a supernatural thing of like he would just keep going, like he's right behind her, and the guy's like, oh, it's gone. It's like, well, how did that happen? Like some magical ghost or something. And And then this bit was fucking weird. What did you think when you saw this bit?
Oh, it's so horrible. In a way, it's more horrible than some of the other, more grotesque scenes, just because your hopes are completely dashed. You
Slowly
do assume that she's found some sanctuary.
Yeah.
Even though this guy is kind of like weird and everything, but we've seen him earlier in the film.
Yeah.
And
he was the one that tried to say, don't go anywhere, just keep going or whatever.
Exactly. So you think, okay. And he initially is quite comforting to her. And then quite soon you start to see all these telltale little quirks and signs in his behaviour. And then he gets like, gets a sack out. Right. Oh, man.
He just kind of walks in with it. And at first, you're like, as the audience, you're like, what's that? And then suddenly you cotton onto it as fast as she does. But that whole bit, it's like having that moment of calm. But there's also like, they never leave you. It's always on edge because the door's wide open.
Yeah.
But she's just there. And there's like within like 10 feet or whatever, there's just this open door. So you're still expecting something to like come through or something like that.
Yeah. It's that assumption,
there's no
that
phone
little bit of respite though. That little assumption that, you've got people around, it's going to be okay. And then when it's not okay, it just heightens its like tenfold back up again. This guy with his sack. And then he's just like slapping her with a broom like she's just like an animal. Yeah,
just poking her. He's getting like you find out like he's a bit of a sadist basically because of the way he treats the others. And that's what's weird is like for the next like 10, 15 minutes, you're in a family drama now. Like the most dysfunctional family ever. But yeah, he's kind of getting some like pleasure out of like being nasty to her.
And his face.
He's all like weird now.
When he's hitting her with the broom, there's something so repulsive about that. Like the joy and pleasure and the way, he's got a great face, this guy.
Yeah.
It's so unpleasant, something really revolting.
Yeah.
Even though initially he's been the sort of like face of civility almost. You suddenly see it twisted,
Yeah. He looks like he should be like an authority of some sort, and that's what it kind of is. I also love the fact that there's that whole bit where he goes back to shut the door and turn the light off. It goes about like the cost of electricity. And again, it's like they're piss poor. I think they kind of go into this a bit in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which I know is kind of jumping, but in that they make their money off of human meat, basically. And they don't really talk about it here at all. It's more just like there's a barbecue and meat and it's just a weird thing and they're just poor, whatever, because they're out of business at the killing the cows or whatever. But
and he shoves her in the van and he's like saying, it's okay, it's going to be okay, and which is obviously really creepy. And she is absolutely screaming here.
Yeah,
it's really distressing.
Yeah, it is really distressing. She's a great screamer. And then you see the hippie guy. Then you see the hitchhiker again, and they're like arguing. He's like, "I told you not to leave your brother alone, and you almost got caught at the cemetery." Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay, so it's confirmed that he was the one that did all the stuff at the cemetery now. So they've confirmed that for you because at first you were like, "Oh, is he? Is it? Not really sure." But then he goes in, and Leatherface is what I love, right? By the way, is that Leatherface is now dressed in makeup or whatever and taking this motherly role, which is fucking weird in itself. And it's great. And I love the fact it's like, this guy's fucked up, like in so many ways. And
then it's not really spoken about. It's just something there for you to detect and infer from, isn't it?
Yeah, true. Exactly. It's not even a thing that they deal with. But also, and he's making like all these horrible pig noises and stuff. But also, I was thinking, realistically, that meant that when he chased her into the thing, he would have had to turn around, run back to the house, get dressed, put dinner on, all in the time it took for everything that we saw. And that guy had a car as well. So I don't know how that happened, but let's just not worry. Let's not dwell on that for too long.
This is where so they're setting the table with dinner, right? And they're strapping her in the chair. And it's so disgusting because then you see Franklin's arms and it's his wheelchair. It's that right?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
That again, it's absolutely nauseating. This is weird. I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of that seems to be filmed like from above.
Yeah.
What's all that about?
Yeah, I had the impression, it's also like some of it a bit later on looks as if it's filmed from another room. So I think it's more of a like voyeur kind of thing, more than anything, as in a bit more like it's tried to be a bit more fly on the wall. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a stylistic choice.
It made me feel a bit queasy, which is a good thing, right? And this whole scene is just now in this dining scene. It's just so it becomes sort of like surreal in its like extreme, in how extremely vile it is.
It's pure nightmare. Like this is her mind breaks basically during this whole scene. I was also thinking, is it like looking down just as we were talking? Because the whole idea is that this is basically like hell. So you're like looking down as in this is like the pits. Like, this is where pure depravity and horrible shit. This is what it's down there basically in more than one sense.
Apparently this was the guy that plays that cook character. This was his last day of shooting on the film, so they were like, well, we've got to just get everything. So apparently this was like a 30-hour day,
right? And
apparently they filmed this in the day, so they just had all the curtains shut, and basically all the cast saying like it was the hottest. You know, it was genuinely really, really hot. They've got all of those like animal bones and stuff around. And there's a thing on the table. It's like made out of dead chicken. And they said also this was like towards the end of shooting, and they'd all been wearing the same clothes. Like they hadn't changed or cleaned the clothes. So basically, you know, all that like that grit and grime and everything, it was like really real. They said it absolutely stank. And they were like, the guy that was played Leatherface, like he's a big guy. They were like, he absolutely stank.
Yeah. Okay.
The whole thing was just like the most revolting smell.
Yeah.
Imagine. And you can see it all on the screen. It's great.
Yeah, it is good. I thought it was that the guy who plays the granddad didn't want to get back into his makeup again. So he wanted it all done at once.
Oh, really?
It took like hours to get into the makeup. And he was like, I'm not putting this back on.
It could be.
We're getting it done now.
Because he was quite young, that guy, I think.
Yeah, I heard that. I don't know what he looks like. But yeah, this whole sequence is like the climax, basically. Because like she's just going insane. Like there's close-ups of her eyes going crazy, like a wild animal that's trapped. She's screaming. All that stuff is just like really fucking horrible. You see a bit of like the interaction between them as a family, and that normality almost makes it even weirder because and he's like, we do all the work or whatever, and you just, well, I don't like killing and whatever and all this stuff. And she's trying to plead with him, and she's like, I'll do anything, like literally offering herself up just to get out of it and all this, and it's just working on so many different levels.
Yeah.
Then when they bring the granddad down, well, that's what happens first, actually, isn't it? Because they bring the granddad down, he sucks on the finger, and apparently, like when they did it, they were trying to do it, and the blood wouldn't pump out properly, and so the Leatherface guy, Gunnar Hansen, cut her finger for real.
Oh,
he just got sick of doing it. He just wanted to get the shot done, so he actually cut her finger. And that's a shot that he what a fucking dick. He's like sucking on the blood again, which is kind of like a vampire style, like supernatural, like, you know, part of it. Again, it's kind of like playing into that whole like monster weirdness, sacrificial blood power thing.
This is one bit where I think it's a little bit weak because it's just it's so shocking. That moment when you realise it's not a dead body and that he's alive. I mean, it is great because it's just so like surreal. That's where it really tips into like this is becoming totally surreal nightmare stuff.
Yeah,
but it is a little, you know, if up until now you've accepted that all of this could be real, these are real people and real characters, it is a little bit absurd because the makeup is so. I mean, they could have maybe made the makeup a bit more realistic, but I mean, it's quite clear that this is like an ancient cadaver.
Mm.
And then suddenly he sucked that finger and he's alive.
Mm. Well, again, it's that, like I remember when I was watching it from way back when, as well, it was always the bit that kind of struck me as like, oh, fuck, like that's really weird. But then I think it's almost like, again, it's like the elder, right? It's that like tribal respect for the elder thing. And also the idea that people would eat each other to live longer, and all this stuff. I think it might play into that a little bit. But yeah, it is a bit weird how it just suddenly comes alive, and it is a bit surreal. But by this point, we're like, yeah, totally into like fucking weird nightmare stuff. And the whole sequence, like this montage of like weird, surreal sequences in between bits of dialogue.
Yeah. Good close-ups on her eyes.
Yeah, really great close-ups.
You can see the tears coming out.
It's nasty, like really horrible stuff. Like it's frenzied, pure frenzy.
Yeah.
And there's one bit where like Leatherface keeps going in, like getting really close to it and all that. It's like really horrible. But I remember it's one where he does it and the older brother is like, oh, like, what's Leatherface going to do now? kind of
They're
thing.
totally mocking her, aren't they? And
yeah.
You realise that there's no humanity here.
Yeah, remorse, of course, or anything.
And
even
also
like,
that,
I don't like the killing. It's like, oh, fuck off.
But also that it's just another, they're quite blasé about it, and it's just another day for them. And you really start to think there's no appealing to them. There's no way out of this.
Yeah.
Because they don't see the severity of the situation at all.
Mm.
That's what's really kind of, I think that's what really like makes you scared.
Mm. Yeah, there's literally like no hope.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where it's like, that's when it suddenly turns where he's like, oh, let's just get on with it. And then you're like, oh, fuck, like, they're
that's
not,
it.
like, I'm going to die. And then the only thing that saves her is because the guy's like, let's let Grandpa kill her. Which is how she's able to get away. Like, Grandpa's the best killer ever was. And that,
he did 50 in one. He did 60 in 5 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. And
He's a champion whacker.
Yeah.
You're going to whacker?
Yeah, exactly. And the way they've put the head over the bucket, again, like she's an animal. It's like having her bleed out and they're trying to get him to like bash her head. They go, get her, Grandpa, get her, Grandpa. Whatever. That whole sequence is just like fucking horrible and it takes ages. And he hits her once and you're like, like you hardly see it, but you're just like, oh God, like, so you're thinking, oh, maybe she'll get away. But when they hit her, you're like thinking, oh my God, like maybe this is it. Like, maybe she's not going to get away.
Yeah, it's going to be a really slow drawn out, brutal death.
Yeah, what really slow, horrible death, yeah.
For me, I had a moment where I was watching this and my own personal take, one of the reasons I like this film, is I kind of read it as a little bit of a parable around man's inhumanity to animals.
Definitely like a pro-vegetarian like message, like an anti-meat is murder, basically. Message behind it.
I don't think Toby Hooper's like a hardcore vegetarian or anything. I don't think that was really part of what he was doing. But I kind of see it. You got that, like you said, that scene at the beginning where you actually see what I think is slaughterhouse footage.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they go, and then there's all this stuff about. Basically, the teenagers are the animals, and you, the audience, get to see what these animals that are talked about throughout the whole film go through when they go through the slaughterhouse and the abattoir, and they're basically put through and all of that, and they're shown that Leatherface and the other characters show those teenagers the same amount of respect that the cows are shown, which is none, and they're just treated as animals, and they're just. Leatherface doesn't show any malice, but it's just like, just bam them to death with a hammer. And but obviously you're put in the position of actually seeing all the fear that they go through. And that's really right there at the end is like, this is it. This is what the animal goes through right at the end when it's got his head over a bucket and they're just bashing away at it. Like and it's a callback to what he explains, the hitchhiker, isn't it, in the van at the beginning about like, it was better with the sledgy.
It's also like the idea, like people put their like if they go hunting, they put like their heads on show as like trophies, and that's essentially what they're doing. They've got these like little trophies, and like the fact that he's called Leatherface, leather, obviously being made from the skin of animals that people use to show off. There's an element, I think, of that there. So it definitely can be seen like that. I don't think it was probably intended for it, but I think it's it will definitely put you off meat.
It shows you people being reduced to the animals that are the kind of, the framework, this idea of all the slaughterhouse.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we're coming to the end now. So she's able to get away. The hippie's just basically like, I'll do it. And then you're like, okay, fuck, here we go. But she's able to break free. She jumps out the window and it's all like nice and light outside. So there's a bit of hope. And then this end bit is just like, again, like the whole thing is just amazing. And this end bit is just mad because she's like running away, but the hippie's slicing over the knife and getting her as well, like slicing her back. She's covered in blood, trying to get away. Leatherface comes out with his makeup on. And he's got his chainsaw now in his suit where he's dressed up for dinner because they must have had dinner at like 6 a.m. or something. And the hippie gets squished by the truck, which is great. And this poor big black guy comes out. So what the fuck is going on? And suddenly there's this guy with a chainsaw. He's just like, doesn't even say anything, but he's just trying to like help her. And he just like, bear in mind, he just runs off.
I love that bit.
Leatherface, he doesn't get back in the truck. Leatherface is still there. So whatever happened to that guy, he's just legging it across this motorway.
That is the sequel.
Still to this day.
That is the sequel. I don't,
sequel that should have been.
It's who is he? Sequel. Where does he go? What happens to him next?
Yeah.
I love him.
Mad. It's such a cool, weird thing to do because it's like, it feels like a bit real. Like that's what would really happen. I don't know, like in a really weird way. And yeah, I love the fact that, he gets it. Leatherface gets his like leg cut a little bit, whatever, makes him go a bit slower. So they go, she is able to jump in the back of this pickup truck. And then this final scene's great for many reasons because one, she's like covered in blood. She's screaming, but she's also kind of laughing. So basically it's like she's mentally torn apart. Like she's just gone absolutely mad. Like the whole thing has just totally fucked her head up completely. And at the same time, there's that element where he's kind of doing the same thing, where he's like throwing his chainsaw around in this violent manner, but also making it, on the other hand, like slightly like this beautiful pirouette kind of like dance. And there's this kind of weird duplicity, not duplicity, but this weird image parallel basically between the two things that are kind of happening, these two like extremes of emotion that they're both playing with, but also like this dance. It's like, is it like a celebration dance? Is it like kind of what's going through? But it just ends on this weird like moment of wonder, and then that's it. It's just the end. That's it. Just as quick as that. It's the end of the film.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I remember again when we first saw it. I remember going, "Why is he dancing at the end?" You're like, "He's not dancing. He's really angry."
Did I?
So I was watching. I was like, "He definitely does two pirouettes."
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's fair enough. I mean, he is like obviously it's both, right?
Yeah.
Also, the fact that it's a beautiful shot. Like, it's beautiful light. It's the morning light and all this stuff. It's just great.
Apparently, it's again. I was watching this documentary, and Toby Hooper was saying, like, I really wanted it to be that sunrise moment, and like have the flare of the sun in the camera and all this, and that color. It was like, unless you're willing to sit up all night with the whole crew, then we can do that. So basically, they said they waited till there was like the right cloud cover, and then they'd rush out and quickly try and film that ending sequence.
Oh, really?
He said he really wanted that image of Leatherface though, like against the skyline.
Right.
And it is great, and that's probably become like one of the most iconic shots, right? Because that got used then on all the. When you think about like video covers and posters and things, it's often using that shot of him.
Yeah, it's just visually weird in a sense that it's beautiful, it's intoxicating. It's void of emotion in any other way in the sense that he's wearing a mask. And yeah, it's horrific and beautiful at the same time. And I think that's what kind of pulls people in. It fills them with wonder almost. But the fact that she's like screaming and getting away, and all that, but she's like totally fucked. And yeah, it's great. But that last half hour, whatever it is, fuck me, just pure. It's like a pure nightmare sprint, just through to the end. And I'm glad it just ends as well.
Yeah,
like you made it. Like it's done. That's where it would end, because then it's like the rest is just left to your imagination completely. Yeah, God, that's really good. Should we take a break, Dan? And then we'll come back with a few little. I've got a few like little tidbits of info, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yep.
Cool. Let's do it. Let's take a break.
Bye.
Right, welcome back. So yeah, a few little bits and pieces of this, Dan. You probably know a lot about this anyway, but it got made for $140,000 at the time, which is tiny, and it made over $30 million at the domestic box office. So it's one of the most profitable films, I believe, of all time, which is great. What I love about this as well is that they tried to get it as a PG. But it got an R, and that's what's one of the cool things, is that there's not actually that much gore in it. A lot of it's like true. Left in your head. But it got banned in several countries, of course. And yeah, one of the inspiration things. So one of the guys who co-wrote it is a guy called Kim Henkel. Guy or a girl? I presume it was a guy. If I don't know, I've just got that. Okay, there we go. He said this. I'll just read it out verbatim. It's about Ed Gein. So I definitely studied Gein, but I also noticed a murder case in Houston at the time. A serial murder you probably remember called Elmer Wayne Henley. He was a young man who recruited victims for an older homosexual man. I saw some news reports where Elmer Wayne said, I did these crimes and I'm going to stand up and take it like a man. Well, that struck me as interesting, that he had this conventional morality at that point. He wanted it known that now that he was caught, he would do the right thing. So this kind of moral schizophrenia is something I tried to build into the characters. I think he's talking about the older guy there, the older brother. There was also one. I'm trying to find my actual bit about. Yeah, this is it. So Hooper also based this about this idea of apparently it was going to be about trolls under a bridge or whatever, this film, and then he changed it to a character who eventually became Leatherface. But the idea actually came from a doctor I knew. I remembered that he'd once told me the story about how when he was a pre-med student, the class was studying cadavers, and he went into the morgue and skinned a cadaver and made a mask for Halloween. We decided Leatherface would have a different human skin mask to fit each of his moods. But that is weird in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
The fact that these doctors carved up just that they've
awful.
That. Yeah, it's so fucking weird.
No controls back then, ethics.
Yeah, at all. One of the other things, I won't go into it too much, is just how it got made. Like, just the financing, because apparently, like, at one point, the mafia got involved. But they went over budget. They were trying to get him more money in post. They were selling rights left, right, and centre. There was a whole court case trying to get some of the money back. The actors basically kind of diddled out of their money because they were promised a certain percentage, and then that got halved, and then they were waiting for ages to get anything. And apparently all that was just a nightmare. And there's a bit of a court case, I believe, about it, which when they got, the filmmakers got like $500K or something back. At the time.
This was in the this documentary that I watched.
Oh, really? Go on. You probably know more about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They were running out of money at the end of the shoot, so instead of paying the actors, they offered them options. And I think the only actor, and not just the actors, actually some of the crew, but that guy who played Franklin, he said the last bit of filming they did was actually the scene where he gets rolled down the hill.
Right.
And basically he went to them on that day and he just said, if I don't get my money, you can get someone else to sit in the chair and go down. So they actually, he said he got his money in full. And he said the reason, he said, you can see it on my face, which is a bit fanciful. But he was like, when I went down that hill, I had a check in my front pocket for my full pay. But everyone else got these options, but what they didn't realise was that I think they thought they were getting a percentage of the like profits from the film. But actually they were getting a percentage of the profits made by one of the production companies that was set up. And I think they set up 2 production companies and then maybe a third one entered the fray.
Yeah.
Because then they said, they didn't have enough money to finish the film in post-production. And that's when this other company, I can't remember what they were called, Bryanston or something like this?
Yeah, something like that.
That's the mafia one.
Right.
So they were like, when they went in like years later to try and like audit the books, they said it was literally like just some guy with these heavies around him. They're like, we need to look at your books. And he's like, you ain't looking at my books. They were like, well, so yeah, that's when then there was a court case and they sued them. And at that point they said, oh, we've gone bankrupt.
Right.
So the fact that you said like it made all these millions of dollars, everyone's like, and then so none of the cast and crew, they got like hardly anything. And that guy that plays Leatherface, Gunnar Hansen, throughout this documentary, he keeps talking. It's like they've edited it to make him sound like an absolute sap. He's constantly like, yeah, and then I got like a check for $42 or something. And every subsequent sequel, he keeps talking about his negotiations, trying to be cast as Leatherface and how they never wanted to pay him.
You know.
He's always like going, that's just union pay. Go back and like think about how much you value what I can bring to this film. And he'd be like, then they came back and like offered me lower. But
it's just a guy in a mask. I kind of like, it's difficult, isn't it? I heard that he like to prepare for his role. Yeah, he went to like a special needs school and watched how the students moved, and he went to like a pig farm or whatever and all this stuff just to get in the mind frame or whatever. Mad.
Apparently they cast someone else originally, and on the first day of filming they were like, yeah, he's just drunk in his motel room. We desperately need anyone else.
That poor guy, poor Gunnar Hansen. It's awful. So it's a bit of a story behind it. It's a bit weird. And the fact that, like I'm just kind of going through some of the stuff that you mentioned about the fact that it was so hot, like a lot of the windows were closed, really long days, a really grueling shoot. And I think, there's a quote here from Ed Neal, who played the hitchhiker, talking about money. He said, 3 months, no check. 6 months, no check. 9 months, a check for $28.45. We were angry.
I mean, when you talk about the millions that it made.
Yeah, still making.
Yeah.
It's mad, isn't it?
Can we talk about Ed Gein a bit more?
Oh, Dan, it's like you read my smelly mind. We're going to head into Nerd Corner and talk a little bit about Ed Gein.
Is it Gein? Is it Gein or Gein?
Oh, good point. I don't know. Okay. I said Gein. I've always said Gein.
Okay.
Maybe it's Gein. I don't know. But yeah, for Nerd Corner, for those that didn't know, this story is very loosely based on the story of Ed Gein. Maybe it's Gein. I'm not sure. I'm going to just call it Ed Gein. So Dan, how much do you know about Ed Gein?
A bit.
A bit too much, maybe.
Yeah. I think, a bit is too much, really.
Yeah. Well, I kind of I just basically went through Wikipedia, I'm going to be honest. I didn't read any biographies on him or anything like that, but there was some interesting little tidbits I thought I would just kind of pull out for you. So basically, in the end, he confessed to killing 2 women, a tavern owner called Mary Hogan in 1954, and a Plainfield hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, in 1957. He was initially found to be unfit to stand trial, was put in a mental health facility, and then in 1968 he was judged to be legally sane and was found guilty of one of the murders, I think, and then was in a psychiatric institution where he died. So he was it's a bit of a strange one, because he was one of those people where it's like, oh, he was such a lovely boy, but he was basically obsessed with his mum. Their dad was a bit of a dick or whatever, but his mum was also a bit of a dick, quite a controlling mother by the sounds of it. And it was him and his brother Henry, and apparently, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's horrible, but apparently they were like, him and his brother were burning some vegetation or whatever on their property, and the fire got out of control. And he was like, "Oh, my brother's missing." And then when they looked for him, they found a dead body lying face down, and he'd been dead for ages. And he died of like heart failure. And I think later on they said it might have been asphyxiation or whatever, but there was bruises on his head and all this stuff. And they were like, "Yeah, this has nothing to do with the fire." He's just like dead. And it's never been, proven or whatever that Ed Gein did it. But it's kind of insinuated that there was a bit of a Cain and Abel thing, which you can imagine. So after that, it was just him and his mum, and it was them for a while. And then basically in 1957, this woman who worked at this hardware store went missing, and they found that it looked like Ed Gein was the last person to buy something there. And that's kind of when they started searching the farm, I believe is what happened. And they found a decapitated body of one of the women in a shed, hung upside down with her legs, by her legs with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrists, dressed out like a deer, apparently, if you can imagine that. She'd been shot by a rifle, and all those things were done after she'd actually died. Then as they searched the house, they found more and more weird stuff. So here's a list of what they found, Dan. You ready?
The inventory.
The inventory, yes, indeed. Whole human bones and fragments, a waste basket made of human skin covering several chair seats, skulls on his bedposts, female skulls, some with the top sawn off, bowls made from human skulls, a corset made from a female torso skinned from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from the skin of female heads, Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, Mary Hogan's skull in a box, Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack, Bernice Warden's heart in a plastic bag in front of Gaines' pot-bellied stove, 9 vulva in a shoebox, a young girl's dress and the vulvas of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old, a belt made from human female nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, fingernails from female fingers.
Are you willing to gamble it all for tonight's star prize?
Yeah, this is the generation game. It's all just running past on whatever they call it, a belt or whatever. But yeah, apparently he'd been stealing from graveyards, mainly from women who were middle-aged and resembled his mother, which you can imagine. And he had started putting together basically a woman suit so he could become his mother. Using the human skin as masks and stuff like that. So from this, you obviously had films like Psycho, which was based on this, amongst other bits and pieces. But yeah, you can see Texas Chainsaw in there. And it is one of the most weirdest, horrific, strangest things in history. And yeah, that's what kind of put him on the map. So yeah, it's a bit of a...
That's what put him on the map.
Put him on the map. I didn't really know how to say that. I made him famous, but it's like... it's a bit of a weird way of saying it. So it's really grotesque and really weird and disgusting and horrible.
But fascinating.
But fascinating at the same time, like the depth of depravity.
People want to keep making films about him, writing books about him and analysing it and trying to understand it.
I mean, there's always one thing, this is kind of going off on a tangent a little bit. There's always one thing which I always find weird about this stuff is that you always hear about these things like years or whatever after they've happened. And it makes you think, what's out there now that's like not been reported yet? Or what's happening out there right now that might never get reported, might never get found?
Yeah.
This is just because he got sloppy, basically. I don't think he was particularly intelligent. I don't think. Well, to a degree, who knows? But the fact that he was able to get found was because there was a receipt, basically, I believe, with his name on. He was the last person to see him alive, so it's quite easy police work.
Yeah.
Mad, isn't it, Dan?
It's mad. It's mad. There's another film that I've seen about him, which, interestingly enough, came out the same year. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, called Deranged: Confessions of a Necrophile.
God.
I had it on DVD, actually. I watched it once, and I thought, I'm not going to watch that again. I took it to the charity shop.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, apparently Ed Gein never had sex with the bodies.
Yeah. I think
he said they stank.
Necrophile in the more literal sense, in that someone who is obsessed with death, a fan of death. Confessions of a Necrophile.
What am I thinking of then?
Well, it's used more. Well, it's used more popularly to mean that, doing that to a dead body, but it can also just mean a student of death. But it's like Canadian film, and it's more
mislabeled. Poor people.
It's a drier film. It's almost got like a feel of documentary about it, but it's also got like more satire in there, which is quite interesting. Sort of satirizes the press a bit and like the reporting of these deaths. But it does show, if you're interested in similar films, similar subject matter, it's a very different type of film, but it's quite an interesting watch. And it culminates and ends with that scene of them raiding the house and finding the body upside down, cut up like a deer. But all throughout, like, no one wants to believe. Everyone can see that this guy is weird and doing weird things, but they don't want to believe it. Of like good old Ed, who's just this like kind of like sad character, you know. Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting because, again, like in this documentary I was watching, they were kind of making like a case that this is like a big trailblazing film, which it is, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But there were other films, around the same time handling similar subject matter.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an infamous case. I would kind of thing anyway. But it's definitely, Texas Chainsaw definitely took a new spin on it. So Dan, final reviews.
Oh, I've got a bit more.
Oh yeah, go on.
I've got some nerd corner. Because I've been, first of all, I thought, let's have a look at some of the soundtracks. Has it been released on vinyl, etc. This music, so it's Toby Hooper with a chap called Wayne Bell. But Toby Hooper also went and made the music, which is cool. It's never been officially released, the soundtrack. Okay. I can't believe it. Especially at the moment, there's record labels like Waxwork and Mondo that specialise in putting out really nice, like vinyl editions of classic cult films, sci-fi and horror. And there's never, ever, ever, not once, been an official release of this soundtrack.
Weird.
I can't believe it. So it's another record for us to add to our potential record label, which is going to put out, what are we doing? We're doing some Mort Garson. I can't remember. And some King Gizzard. So we can add the first official release of the music from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You just have to get those rights.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So after I'd given up on that, I was just looking on YouTube, and there's a guy on here. If you're interested in nerdy stuff, his username is Disc Junkie TV, and he runs a website called TCMDB.
Right.
So it's like IMDb, but it's TCMDB. So it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre database.
Right.
And there's this amazing video. All his videos are great, looking at his copies of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but he's got a massive collection of all the original VHS releases from all around the world.
Wow.
And I watched a couple of his videos just looking at some of his UK VHS copies. So it's quite interesting because they're pre-cert. So
pre-certification.
Yeah. So like anyone listening who's not in the UK, at some point is it BBFC, British Board of Film Certification?
Yeah.
They anything showing in the cinema would be submitted to them for cuts and for certification. But when videos first came onto the market, they weren't, same demands weren't placed on them. So all this stuff came out, it had previously been on the cinema, was then able to be shown on video, completely uncut and uncensored. Although Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, was outright banned anyway. It didn't get a cinematic release at all. Because apparently they just saw the whole thing and there weren't any individual scenes or things to cut. They just said, like, the whole thing is so abhorrent to us. It just has to be banned. So these, like, pre-cert videos are cool because they've never been certified, and they just look, to me, they just look so, like, they look taboo, something dangerous about them. But he's got the first ever UK VHS, and it's cool, right? Because it comes in this weird square box.
Right.
So I've never seen a video in a square box, and it's because this company, it must have been at the time where they were moving from people buying things on Cine-Reel,
right,
and VHS saying just taking off. So the box actually has space that you could put a reel in it or a video cassette. And it's just this really cool old thing. Like, the packaging's so basic, it looks like an old bootleg or something. But and it's got that image of Leatherface at the end of the film, on the front, and just in black and white and red.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's so cool. But yeah, if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'd go and check it out. The TCMDB, and this guy's videos are great.
Brilliant. I remembered as you were saying that I had a actual poster, I believe, of Texas Chainsaw, like an old movie poster. I might have had it at uni. Can't remember. Which sounds similar to that box art. I was just thinking about it. But that's good. That's a good little find, actually.
It's really great. I love that kind of nerdy stuff. So
yeah,
I was enjoying it. Have you,
any other little tidbits?
Well, I just wondered what you thought of Toby Hooper. Like, if you like this, you kind of, to me, there's nothing else there in his in his work that reaches this kind of height.
No, but do you remember we watched a film ages ago that he did immediately after this, and it was about someone who ran a hotel or whatever?
Eaten Alive.
Was that it?
Did we watch that together? We did, didn't we?
Yeah. I think it was like you, me, and my now wife.
It was, yeah. That
and
was
I
the
remember,
film we made immediately afterwards.
Yeah, and I remember it was really, like, awful, but it looked like really cheap, but not like cheap and they got away with it looking good. It was like, this looks dire. It was about someone who ran a motel or something, right?
Yeah, it looked lower budget than this.
And there's loads of, like, weird, colourful lights. I remember that. It was lit really strangely. But he didn't really do, like, obviously his big one, I believe, is Poltergeist.
Oh, yeah.
Which caused a lot of, there was a bit of, it basically, so there's a rule where the director always has to take prominence over the producer or whatever. And that came from Poltergeist, because basically what happened was Steven Spielberg produced it and his name was everywhere, and his name was basically bigger on the credits than Toby Hooper's. And Toby Hooper was like, it's my film. Like, it's not on. And there was a bit of a thing about it, and it became a rule that stuck forever. I believe that's where it came from. But it was much...
Go Toby.
Yeah.
Stick it to the man.
Yeah. But the reason why Spielberg couldn't direct Poltergeist was because he was making E.T. at the same time. But what would happen is, apparently when they were taking downtime or whatever from E.T., he'd go over to Poltergeist, and depending on who you talk to, people were like, yeah, basically as soon as Steven Spielberg turned up, he just took over, and it was just a case of listening to him until he left again. So a lot of people were like, yeah, Toby Hooper didn't really direct it. Like, Steven Spielberg, it's a Steven Spielberg film. It's not a Toby Hooper film. But saying that, I don't mind Poltergeist, and I actually quite like it.
I like it, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very dated quite badly now, but I still enjoy it.
I like how it's dated.
Yeah.
Because it's from that nostalgic era for me. Even though I didn't
True.
see it at the time, I look at it and it's like, oh, this is so mid-80s.
Yeah. But that was kind of like the biggest, apart from obviously Texas Chainsaw, that was his biggest actual commercial kind of hit. And he didn't really do that much after that. I mean,
he did another film around the same time. I think off the top of my head, like maybe 1986, did a remake of Invaders from Mars. So I really love the original, old, like I think it's late 50s, early 60s black and white film, sci-fi.
Right.
And he did this like big budget version of it, and it's I mean, it's nothing like the original, but it's kind of good fun. It's weird. It's actually more like, it's like a teenager's film, not like a teenager, like even younger, like for 12, 13-year-olds.
Right.
But there's all these crazy, like when they get on the spaceship, these crazy aliens and Martians and monsters and things. It's quite good fun.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen that. So, I mean, he did a lot of, I'm looking at his IMDb, but he did a lot of like TV stuff basically for ages. He did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is weird in another level. Like, it's where the first one was like more gritty, real, frenzied horror. This one has more of a slapstick kind of comedy vibe to it. It's also got a character in it called LG, which my friends call me for my surname. And it's the only time I've ever heard a character called LG on film, ever. But yeah, basically, he did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Invaders from Mars, as you said. He did Life Force, actually, which
that's weird.
I think I saw this years ago, but I definitely have not seen it lately.
I saw it last year.
Oh, did you? Right, so he did that.
It's weird. It's quite flawed, but it's basically about alien vampires.
Right, okay. And yeah, he did Poltergeist. He did the Salem's Lot TV miniseries in 1979. Death Trap, which is what we were talking about.
Eaten Alive.
It was also called Eaten Alive.
Yeah.
And it is awful. And yeah, it was done right after. It's got Marilyn Burns in again, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
She plays one of the girls in it. Robert Englund is in it as well, I believe. England, he plays like a young hooligan, doesn't he, or something like that?
I can't remember.
He goes on to play Freddy Krueger, by the way, the original Freddy Krueger. So yeah, should we go into our final impressions, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. What are yours? I believe it's my turn to do a voice, isn't it?
I think so. So you can do my impression is that. What is my final impression? I just think it's really like unflinching horror film. You know, and it's well made throughout. It's well plotted, well written. I think like what you said there about there kind of being 3 acts is really on the nose. You know, and each act has a different kind of pace and rhythm to it.
Yeah.
That really makes it work. It just feels very authentic and true to itself, and it's bloody horrible and bloody scary.
Yeah.
It just really, it really works at you on an emotional level. And like I said, when I saw it first time, it really kind of like stayed with me under my skin for a while. It's easily one of the most important, probably best horror films ever made. So really, it's something everyone should see.
Yeah, I agree. So Dan, what should I do as a voice?
Maybe you should do. No, that's too hard. I was going to say a chainsaw.
Why do I do that?
How about in the voice of Steven Spielberg, as if he'd produced this film?
Fucking hell. Hi, I'm Steven Spielberg. I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre whilst flat out on my bed with 10 hookers. And it got me really hard. And as I was looking up, I heard the noise of a pig, and I thought, who brought the pig in? I'm Steven Spielberg. And I got up and I shouted, I'm Steven Spielberg. And then I said, no pigs. And I looked and there was Leatherface on the screen. I thought, wow, this guy who is this guy? And I told all the hookers to get out and take all their drugs with them. And then I made a list of directors. I called it Spielberg's List. And it gave me an idea for another film, which came later on. But this list had some directors I needed for Poltergeist. And on the top, I crossed out Marty Scorsese, and I put Tobe Hooper. And I was like, I want him to make Poltergeist because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the best films to have an orgy to. And I'm Steven Spielberg, and I should know. That's my final impression.
Thanks, Stephen. Really interesting to hear your insights.
You see my insides? Sure.
So are we going to look at any reviews?
I hate it.
So I've got a few reviews here for you, Dan. As you can imagine, there were a couple of good ones. Let's start off, though, with 1-star review here from Jay Kilby. And the subject is Horror Fan Says. And it says, I'm a fan of horror, of both old and new, but somehow I'd never seen this cult movie. Well, now I have, and what a colossal waste of effort it was. I sat through desperately inept acting, unimaginative cinematography, a grating score that failed to summon any atmosphere, and a whole lot of screaming. Overall, a laughable piece of cinema history. As the final credits unexpectedly rolled, I was unaffected and pleased to see the back of it. I'm trying to remember that this was released in the early 70s, and that at the time it probably was a radical change of direction for the horror genre. I can see elements of it that have influenced other directors and movies, but good grief, what a mess. If you want affecting seminal horror, go watch some John Carpenter or George Romero and leave this alone.
Hard to know what his grievance was with the film.
This one's quite a good one. This is 1-star garbage. It's the rating.
Great.
It's a bit long, but bear with it. I'm rating the plot, not the Blu-ray transfer or sound. I've only seen this on Blu-ray once, and I will not be watching it again. I love Ridley Scott's Alien, a movie he aspired to become the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space. Fortunately, Mr. Scott failed miserably and made an actual masterpiece worthy of the title a horror classic. I would give this movie between 2 and 5 points out of 100, mainly for the notoriety the movie has garnered over the years. And yes, I am aware that is not a part of the plot, so let's be honest and give it 0 points out of 100 instead. Somehow this movie had eluded me through the years, and I've only recently watched it for the first time. I actually have the more recent remake on DVD, and I'll definitely pick that if I had the choice. I love the way he's saying he's rating the plot, and he's not talked about the plot once. Yeah. I wasn't horrified, terrified, scared, or even cared. I were rooting for Leatherface all the way through. The cast, not the character that they portray, deserve to be chopped into a mushy red pulp by a chainsaw. Kirk enters house, walks around a bit. Hello, is there anybody in here? Metal door slide open. Leatherface jump out, grab Kirk and pulls him in, and the metal door slides shut. I laughed at this point. Just so absurd, laughable and stupid. It's not what happened, by the way, was it? He bashed him on the head. But still. Franklin is so annoying. You want him dead. You want him dead within the... I've lost it now. Where is it? You want him dead within the first minute he speaks. I would have killed Sally in the end, just to shut her up. I'd also killed the remainder of the cast around the table for their piss-poor performances. I was also disappointed that Sally wasn't killed in the end. The acting is so exaggerated, awkward and bad that the director should be shot for not intervening. How this has come to be considered a horror classic is honestly beyond me. A possible explanation is that I grew up with movies, significantly better funded and of a much higher quality than this. I'm truly shocked at how bad this was. I purchased mine, used at the local Blockbuster when they closed shop, at a mere £3, and I still feel robbed. Do not watch. A lot happening there. He did not talk about the plot once, by the way. Memento of the plotto.
He lost the plot.
He did lose the plot. And the last 1-star review here, Dan, is by a guy called Joe. It's probably my favourite 1-star review. And the subject is 1 star. and it is only one chainsaw kill, not a massacre. Which is true. Which is true. He killed Franklin with the chainsaw, and that was it. The other ones are already dead. Not funny. Another one. This is T Hall, the best horror film ever. I just like the line. He gave it 5 stars. Gunnar Hansen in his Pretty Woman mask is the epitome of terror.
That's very good.
Pretty Woman mask. This is one. I just like the subject. It's a good picture. Give me $2. 5 stars.
Is he selling his copy?
Yeah. It's good. So that's all the reviews I've got for that. I don't know. Did you find any? Did you have a look for any?
No, I didn't, I'm afraid.
For fuck's sake, no, it's fine. Yeah, well done, mate. It was funny. It's good stuff. I think we've totally done Texas Chainsaw Massacre to death now.
To death.
A bloody horrible, pulpy death. Anything?
I'll go to death.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you want people to leave on?
No, just if you like it and you haven't seen the other films as well, actually, that 2 is really good, and I think 3 is all right. It's a bit cheesy, but
I don't think I've seen 3.
Maybe we can.
Is that the one with Matthew McConaughey?
No, that's the 4th one. I've never seen that. But yeah, I don't know. Are they on our list?
No, but they can be. But the remakes, to be honest, the 2003 remake was okay. But the rest of them are awful. There was they did do a prequel, I think it's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, which I saw, which is basically, well, spoilers for this coming up, but it's an awful film, but it's like what happened to Leatherface when he was a kid. And basically it's like, there's like four kids or whatever that break out of a mental institution. And one of them's like a big fat guy. He's like a bit mentally retarded or whatever. So the presumption is that he's going to turn into Leatherface. And then there's this like kind of jock kid who's a bit more like messed up in the head and whatever. And you kind of rooting for him because you think he's a bit, it's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a little bit. Like, is he mad? Isn't he mad? Is he just like got a bit of a temper or something like that? And you kind of weirdly root for him a little bit. But him and this girl kind of go a bit psycho. And then the big fat kid dies. And you're like, oh, that's weird. Like, so this is supposed to be like the origins of Leatherface. And basically the jock kid puts on the like leather mask thing. And it's like, he's now Leatherface. And you're like, oh, okay.
So they went for the swerve shock twist at the end over anything logical.
Yeah. And it's like,
sounds rubbish.
Oh, I don't really think of it. That's not how I want Leatherface's story to start. I don't want to know how it starts, but if someone was going to tell me, it's like, it wouldn't be that. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. Go check it out. But before we go, we should pick what we're actually going to do next week. So Dan, are you ready for the random subject
Always
generator?
ready.
And remember, guys, you can add to this by just emailing us at either oddcastoddballs@gmail.com or the New Winter Podcast @gmail.com, as we're part of a New Winter Podcast network. And yeah, we'll see if we can add it to the list. So Dan, here we go. Press the button and it is Scratch Acid.
Brilliant. That's great.
The music category, I should say.
That is brilliant. One of my favourite bands, all-time favourite bands. A Texas-based post-rock, post-punk, angry noise, alternative caterwaul of a band.
This is a link to Texas.
From the mid-'80s, yeah, from Austin, Texas. And like I said, one of my favourite bands, they only released one album with an EP either side of it. And I've been on the lookout for these records. Basically, they all got compiled onto one CD at some point, and I've had that CD, for about 20 years or something. But I've been on the lookout for the original records, and they go for so much money, like usually between £60 to £100 each record.
Right. Yeah.
And just this week on eBay, Basically, someone had one on there for £3.
Wow.
Starting bid.
Okay, mate.
It was £3 to buy it now. I got in touch with him and I was like, oh, what's the condition like and all this? And, and got like corresponding with him a bit. And I said, oh, I don't know whether to bid or make you an offer. And he said, if you make me an offer of £1.50, you can have it. So I was like, okay. And then he messaged me back and went, oh, I've got this other one as well. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah. So I got the 2 EPs for, I think I gave him £6.
Blimey. What's the deal there then?
So I'm in a heightened state of being excited about Scratch Acid. So next week is going to be fun.
Well, let's check it out. And yep, thanks everyone for listening. Next week, we'll be scratching some acid. And I'll be scratching my arse. But yeah, have a good one and see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the ODDCAST, guys. We're part of a New Winter group, so head on over to anewwinter.com to check out our other shows. Go to patreon.com/anewwinter to support the network. You can email us at oddcastoddballs@gmail.com and follow this and our other shows on Twitter and Instagram @anewwinter. So, see you next time on the ODDCAST.